Hello, welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Tom Thumb in Trouble, released in 1940. It's the 290th in the series and it's directed by Chuck Jones. You can find this on the Looney Tunes Gone Collection Volume 5 DVD set. A high definition version is out there as well. It is under copyright, so I can't play the full cartoon here unless Warner Brothers chooses to do so. But in case you haven't seen this one, and it's a rather serious short, it's probably one of the most serious ones that Warner Brothers ever did. In fact, in terms of seriousness, it's pretty much up there with the short Old Glory, which Chuck Jones also directed. So essentially you have Tom Thumb, who's this small little boy who lives with his father in a cabin somewhere in the woods. The father goes out of the house and leaves Tom by himself in the cabin. Tom accidentally falls into some water and is rescued by a bird. The father returns and he thinks the bird is attacking Tom and the bird goes away. It's not really too deep, but before we get into the review, I do want to make one thing clear. I'm going to be judging this short on its own merits. I think it's unfair to judge this one in comparison to Chuck Jones's other, quite frankly, better shorts that he would do later on, like Duck Muck and What's Opera Doc and that sort of thing, when he becomes quote-unquote funny. This was during the period of time where he had a very strong Disney influence, so he was doing a lot of those sniffle shorts, and a lot of the time the shorts would look really good, but they would be incredibly slow, and this one is perhaps his most serious and honestly slowest short. But we're going to take a look at all of it and see what is there of merit, and there's actually quite a bit here that's of merit. It may not be a go-to short for me, it may not be a go-to short for you, but you know what? It's part of the output, it's part of Chuck Jones's journey as an artist, so yeah, let's take a look at this short from start to finish. So vocal-wise, and even if this wasn't a Blue Ribbon reissue print, I don't think the original titles are out there, or maybe they are. If they are, definitely let me know in the comments below. But voice actors would have been uncredited, so according to Keith Scott's Wonderful Cartoon Voices book, Margaret Hill-Tabol does the voice of Tom Thumb, which isn't surprising. She does a lot of the young boy voices and cutesy characters around this time. You have Shepard Strudwick, and this is the last time he would do a voice in a Warner Brothers short, and funnily enough, he was in a few Chuck Jones shorts, so he was the narrator in Mighty Hunters as well, and he just has one of those voices that's just nice and soothing to listen to. He was more or less a working actor at the time. I was looking at his filmography, and nothing really stands out too much, and that's not to say he's been in all bad films or anything, but he was essentially one of those actors that was just everywhere. But what interested me is that he lists Marion Darlington for the whistling effects. So yeah, sometimes you're going to get those really interesting little tidbits there where Keith must have in his research found something that lists which voice actors were paid, and Marion's name must have been on there. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. But another thing to note is just how this film actually looks, and part of that is Robert McKimson's animation, and a lot of that is with the father. If you've watched Old Glory, you'll notice how much the animation looks very similar, and McKimson was able to do this sort of thing. You look at it and think, oh, this must have been rotoscoped, but no, he was that good. He was able to animate real-life human characters in such a way that makes you question, hey, is this rotoscoped or not? It's absolutely incredible. I mean, say what you want as a director, and you can certainly raise a few points about his later directing career, of course, but as an animator, his work was just superb. Whether he's working for Chuck like he is now, or with Clampett, or even doing his own stuff later on, he was one amazing animator. Another thing to note is a lot of the camera angles, and I'm going to point this out. I mean, again, say what you want about this short. It's not particularly funny. It's not really supposed to be. It's supposed to be more serious in nature, short, similar to what Disney had done a fair bit, especially in their Silly Symphony series. But say what you want, but this short tells its story well, and it uses camera angles very effectively. Yes, it is on the slow side, admittedly, but as we'll go through the short, I'll point out some great examples of that. And right away as we open up, if there's any doubt that this was a Disney-type short, listen to the narration. It's telling a fairy tale story. It even starts with Once Upon a Time.
Once upon a time, there was a kindly old woodchopper who lived in a warm little hut on the edge of a great dark forest.
But look at the layouts, how it introduces us to this world. So, of course, we're in a cabin out in the woods, it's winter time, and we go in and we are introduced to our characters, the very large father. I don't think he has a name here, but we're told all we need to know in that narration and in the opening shots. But one interesting thing to note as well is how many times Chuck Jones has explored the idea of having a small character in a big world. I mean, Sniffles is pretty much that. Recently, he was going out to the countryside in a short, and in another short, him and the bookworm side character would be in a toy store where everything's a lot larger. Later on, he would have Bugs Bunny and Davy Duck go up a beanstalk up against a giant Elmer, so he seems to have a fascination with this sort of stuff, but here, it's a basis on an actual fairy tale. And so the alarm goes off, and in one of the very few quote-unquote funny bits in this short, Tom tries to turn off the alarm. I mean, I'd imagine it'd be very loud for him given how small he is, but anyway. The gag does go on a little bit too long, and Chuck Jones will definitely improve on his timing as the years go along. But I love the character reaction here, where he's reacting to the fact that, oh great, the alarm's going off again. But at least this all has a point to it, and that he's doing his best, he's working hard, he's trying to stop the alarm clock, but his father's like, okay, I'm going to do it for you, and he does. Okay, so it's bath time. We see what a caring father this father character is, so he makes a little bath in his hands, and Tom Thumb has a bath. It's a cute bit, of course, and, it's not particularly funny, but what I like here, aside from the animation, is the music, which is Vienna Blood. It's a beautiful song. You definitely need to hear it if you haven't had a chance to do so. But I like that added musical touch when Tom Thumb's finished the bath and he slides down his father's arm and you hear the piano bit. So Carl Starling, sure, he adapted a lot of music, but in this case, he would add those little flourishes that would work well with what's being on the screen. So now Tom Thumb feels like a new man, all dressed up and, well, pretty much going nowhere because his father's pretty overprotective here. So they have breakfast, and again, the scene is very slow and very deliberately paced. This could have been definitely cut down if you really think about it, but at least the animation by Bob McKimson here is amazing. And it's cute in a way, and I guess as a dad, I can sort of relate to this bit a lot more now, where the father has the coffee and he says, that's good.
That's good.
And then you see Tom, he's imitating his father, saying, that's good. It's definitely relatable if you're a dad like me.
Boy, that's good.
Well, son, I'm afraid I got to go to work now. Do up last night's dishes like a good boy.
But the father has to go to work now. I'm assuming he's a lumberjack, given how he's all dressed up. And we get into the meat of the story. Alright, so the father tasks Tom Thumb to do the dishes. Sure, like any good boy, he'll get onto that, and in a scene that's very reminiscent of Whistle While You Work, because remember, this came out only a few years after Snow White hit the cinema screens and enchanted just about everyone, and it's one of my favorite Disney films. It's still amazing even to this day. But you can't deny that the vibe here is pretty much reminiscent of that. You even got a singing bird who will become one of our main characters in this short.
Now I'm going to clean the kitchen, and I'll certainly use the broom. When I finish, I know the kitchen will be a different room. I'll do everything I am able, and I'll polish the glasses bright.
The song he's singing, it's in a little Dutch garden, and Here, it's got substitute lyrics, but it was a popular song around this time, I believe in 1938, and it's been used in a few Looney Tunes shorts around this time, but here it's actually sung with alternate lyrics. So Tom's walking along and he's showing us how skillful he is in doing things like getting a cup onto a hook high above, but he ends up slipping on a bar of soap. And again, if you compare this to the later Chuck Jones, he would obviously have sped this part up, but for what it is, it's fine. So he's slipping along and falls into a pool of soapy water and he's drowning. So you then see the bird looking on and then deciding to help him. This is probably one of my few criticisms of this short, and again, this is something that Jones would improve later on. The reaction of the bird takes longer than it should, so the timing definitely isn't there. And when he flies back and then speeds up to smash through the window, that definitely would have been done a lot better later on. It's not the worst thing or anything, but it is interesting to compare how Jones approached something now versus later on. But you can't deny that the layouts are great, so once the bird smashes through, we then see a shot of the father hearing that the window has been smashed and he's looking on, and we got the down-up shot right there of him looking all shocked. So he's definitely put a lot of thought into how this short was laid out and how it would actually tell the story. Like, just take a look at the cross-cutting between the father running and the bird trying to revive Tom. Now, again, the actions of the bird is rather slow, and Jones will definitely pick up the pace later on, but once again, he's thinking about how the story is being told, so there is definitely some tension here, whether is Tom going to live or is he going to die? We all know he's going to survive, obviously, because otherwise it'd be a really dark short, but in this case, it's definitely a case of Jones thinking things through, especially that wonderful shot of the father just looking on going, what on earth is going on here? Why is there a bird over my son? And immediately draws to the worst possible conclusion that this bird has attacked his son. And as we established earlier on, he loves his son, will do anything for him, so that makes the scene work even better. But man, McKimson really goes to town with his animation here. And it also shows what Jones will do later on, where he would have certain poses being held for quite a bit for maximum effect, and you can see glimpses of that here. And we get a very touching scene where the father, he's obviously drawn the wrong conclusion of as to what's happened here, and poor Tom's trying to explain things, but he's having none of that. It's like, my poor son, and he wants to look after him, and Tom is saying, but Dad, and he has a tear running down. This is definitely not something you usually see in a Warner Brothers short, that's for sure. But listen to the music. It's really touching. I wonder what Carl Stallion was thinking when he was actually scoring this short. It would be like, well, this certainly isn't a Porky short, that's for sure.
But Dad, the bird, he...
Now, don't talk about it, Tom. Just rest and try to forget. Everything will be all right in the morning.
And speaking of music, we now hear Traumerei by Schumann, and I'll probably butcher the name of the song there, but I'll have everything written down anyway so you know how it's spelled. But it's the perfect choice of music here, and I just love how now we're at night, the colors are definitely more darker, and Jones is also clearly playing with light, and he will no doubt continue exploring that, especially in the brilliant short that is Goodnight Elmer. And we see Tom Thumb's got some beautiful handwriting too, so through the beautiful music and through this note, we know what's going to happen next, that Tom just can't live with himself, he just has to find this bird that helped him, and he wants to make things right. And we see more beautiful layouts as he goes out into the cold. But the music picks up as we hear Flight of the Valkyries, as we hear in a rather great way of telling the story as to how we're going to wake up the father, and Tom left the door open and it slams shut due to the wind. So the father notices Tom is gone, and look at the cross-cutting between the father yelling out for Tom, trying to find out where he is. So we see different angles of his face. We see the blizzard just pouring outside.
Tom! Tom! Where are you? Tom! Come back! Tom! Tom!
Again, this is a lot better than I remember it being. So while we hear the father yelling out in the distance, we see that the bird is in the tree. The bird is clearly okay, but Tom's a small boy. He doesn't know that. He thinks the bird might be in trouble, or he just feels guilty about the whole thing, but the bird's fine in its own little nest in the tree trunk there. So he hears that Tom's in trouble. The father can't seem to find him, and sure enough, the bird finds Tom and brings him home. As we then see the next bit where the father is crying, is in despair. Again, if you don't see the opening rings, would you even think that this is a Warner Brothers short? It is definitely one of the most non-Warner Brothers shorts, as I mentioned before, but anyway. So the father's in despair, and then he looks up eventually and sees that the bird has brought Tom home, and he is so happy to see him. And it's rather touching. Again, as a dad, I look at this and yeah, it's definitely melts my heart. So we then finish up with a very cutesy scene of Tom sound asleep in bed, and now the bird can be nice and warm in the house and in the father's beard. And we end right there. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I don't think it's fair to compare this with Jones's later efforts or any other Warner Brothers shorts for that matter, even the ones being released around this time. I think it's an apples and oranges comparison. Sure, you can compare certain elements in terms of Jones's directing career, like I already mentioned before, that certain things aren't paced as well as maybe it could have been, and that's stuff that Jones would pick up later on. So I'm trying to judge this one on its own merits, and if you watch it like that, I think this is a very charming, sweet little short. It's not going to be a go-to short. When I think Warner Brothers, I think of fast-paced, zany action. And apparently Schlesinger must have too. He may have been a hands-off producer, but he certainly knew the sort of product he was making and what was tickling the fancy of all the theater owners at the time. So he's basically said to Jones, knock it off, stop making shorts like this, and pick up the pace. And sure enough, Jones does. He slowly picks things up until he becomes the Chuck Jones that everyone knows. I would also imagine part of it is the expense. If you look at this short, it looks like it's a very expensive short to do, especially with all the dual coloring that was done also in Jones' other short, Old Glory, which is what I mentioned before. So it may have been a cost issue as well. So taking it on its own merits, the animation is amazing, especially McKimson's stuff in this one. The colors, the layouts, and even the editing, the music as well. All of it is done really well here. So this one has to get an 8 out of 10. For what it is, because once again, I don't think it's fair to compare it to the other Warner Brothers works that was coming around this time, because if you do, well, that was not what Jones was trying to do. He was trying to emulate Disney, he said so himself, but yeah, he was told after this short not to do it anymore. But that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.